Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Matthew Belloni. I am the executive editor of The Hollywood Reporter, which I believe is here and being distributed if you'd like to check it out.
Okay.
I am going to be moderating the second panel this morning. We have Carla Hendra, who is CEO of OgilvyRED, which is the global strategic consulting arm of Ogilvy. And we have Mary Shelton Rose, who is with PwC. So we'll sit down.
Thanks.
All right, so that was fascinating, that first panel. A lot of stuff to talk about. One thing that we talked about towards the end was this notion of the measurement problem. And I wanted to start that off with Carla and sort of get your thoughts on this issue of a lot of people out there watching more content than ever, and the challenges in finding them and measuring what they're actually doing versus what traditional measurement says they might be doing.
So I think I might have a little bit of a different point of view about this whole challenge, because I grew up in database marketing. So it's been around for many, many, many years. Lots of data, lots of technology. And I actually believe that because of mass marketing, no one's really had that much of a motivation to really understand how to apply data technologies and to get to know their customers better and to be of more value. And if you're a direct marketer, you have to do that because you live and die by the long tail. But you know, in my experience, only about 5% of the actual data and the capabilities are being applied today. So we could solve a lot of these problems much quicker than we've wanted to so far. But I think what Marcel pointed out is there's now, even in the last year alone, much more recognition that we better do it, because if we don't, consumers are just going to solve it for themselves. And your content will either be ignored if it's not served in a more interesting and you know, relevant way. That's one of the key areas of value exchange, is what's relevant to me as an individual. So I think, you know, we work really closely with IBM and with Axiom and with hundreds of startup technology companies. There's more technology out there than anybody knows what to do with. You just have to be able to integrate it. We've created some cross-platform capabilities, whether it's a WPP platform or Group M or whatever. There's a lot of stuff out there, but I think it's training clients and advertisers and marketers to think different. I mean, they have to stop, you know, doing things in the way that the legacy, you know, has made all the money, and really begin to use some discipline. So I think it's getting over that. How do you have the discipline to go after changing your organization, hiring the right kinds of talent, and really applying what's available?
You know, one example in a recent interview that Ted Sarandos of Netflix did with Hollywood Reporter,
Yeah.
He was talking about the different algorithms that they use in targeting specific Netflix users with different content. Hulu does this with ads. If you watch a certain type of programming, you might get a certain type of ad. So, I mean, how far away is this from this kind of model from being adopted by traditional television providers or other non-digital only outlets?
Well, again, I mean, I don't think anybody's going to be able to, for very much longer, distinguish between traditional and digital. All the media is digitalized now. So whether we define it as what's delivered over IP or what's not, that's not how the consumer defines it. So I believe there is going to be a lot more of that. What really Hulu and Netflix have laid the groundwork for, what they've shown other kinds of media companies the ability to do, you know, people can copy that pretty quickly. You just have to get out and do it.
And I think what I'd add to that is, you know, in order to really take advantage of that behavior, you've got to be able to measure it, which is what we heard earlier. So there are cross-platform measurements evolving, but they aren't really a used currency yet. They're there. We're starting to see advertising dollars spent on them. But as you look to monetize that behavior, you know, you need to have a currency that people buy in and trust. So we know, for example, there's a multiplier effect. If you see an ad on two different platforms, there's a multiplier effect on the brand recognition associated with that. But I think to really optimize this, we're going to have to move forward and accept those cross-platform measurements and that online-offline activity and be able to monetize that appropriately.
And that's a sort of case-by-case basis. I mean, there's a company called Market Share Partners that's based in Los Angeles, but global. They work entirely on algorithms and modeling of media mix, and they have to be able to look at those effects, that multiplier effect, Now, we've done it for many years, kind of building up the individual media spends and results individually. Now we have to be able to do it dynamically, and sort of, that's where, just applying regression analysis and that sort of thing will help us do it. But we've got to get the cases out to the marketers and prove it. And once they see that demonstration, I think people will move in that direction.
So what is a good case study? What is a company that's doing this right? What is a brand that's doing content right?
Well, shall I go?
Go ahead.
I'd like to give the example of DuPont, who's one of our clients, because they really made, with their new CEO a few years ago, Ellen Kuhlman, they made a very conscious decision that they were going to take their marketing spend globally and distribute it very differently from the traditional method. So they can't, and that didn't mean they were going to completely ignore paid media, but they wanted to really be able to look at a model that was paid, earned, and owned. And that, for 4 years ago, when we started this program with them, that was quite unusual. Now we see more and more clients moving into that content-rich approach. So with DuPont, they were changing their brand to stand for 3 things: food, protection, or security, and energy. That's what, so, DuPont has a customer that's everybody from me buying a Corian countertop to a food, gigantic food manufacturing and farming company to everybody in between. So to simplify, those were their 3 platforms. We put together, instead of making television commercials and distributing on, the typical channels, we put together with BBC World News a program of now 40 individual original content videos that we created a ecosystem of distribution. So through BBC, we can get 360 million viewers worldwide, out through that channel. But we also used all of DuPont's owned channels, digital distribution, whether it was their websites or mobile or events, to also distribute. And these stories were about the policemen that they're working with to create incredible new security systems, the farmers that they're doing food science with in emerging markets. And so they're big emotional stories, and all told from the point of view of that person, not from the corporate point of view of we're DuPont, we're doing this. It was all about how the world is becoming better, and it resonates incredibly. So we now have, and therefore have earned a huge amount of additional media impressions. So through all the social media, through the employee base. So I think they really were, going out and doing something brave and different 3-4 years ago, and we've now just expanded it further and further.
But those kinds of experiments, I think people who are in traditional media might hear that and say, well, that's scary. That's someone going around our traditional system. And is that something that you see more of, or is it something that, what is a traditional media owner to do when they hear about strategies like that?
Well, I think embrace and move that direction is probably a good idea, because you can't just sit there and hope that the legacy will continue. And I think many media companies are doing exactly that. Media companies have had digital and other mobile divisions for a long time. I mean, we've been doing experiments for a long time. I think what we're seeing is we're getting to critical mass now, and there have to be new kinds of solutions. So, I think there's no point in being fearful. It's where the consumer and the customer is going, so get there. And I do think that it's not about eliminating past channels or methods of communicating. It's both and. It's not either or. And if we don't look at that, I mean, you see device proliferation. You see, the media habits changing. Continuous partial attention is one of my favorite old terms I heard 10 years ago that I thought was the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. Except if you try and have dinner with anybody under 20, and I have 3 of them in my house, it's not a fun experience, because there is really continuous partial attention permanently, except when they want money. But I get on my mobile device 40 requests a day from those guys. Anyway, so I think I just think it's all moving that way. We should just get on the boat.
Yeah, what I'd add to that is, as you look at the trends and what's happening with television content and viewing and consumption, it's growing, right? And so all of these second screen or alternative screens, because it's more than two usually. All of these opportunities just provide more opportunity for content to be consumed in places that are more and more targeted. So to your point, I think it's more, and there's more room and more opportunity for that consumption, and much more opportunity to more deeply understand the customer, to target where you want to generate that consumption from.
And the other issue is going to be the monetization for the content providers and creators. So as an agency service, we're in the content creation business, and we've been paid that way for a long time. I was with a client last week at a board of directors meeting where they were thrilled to announce that they crowdsourced through PopTent, which is a company we've used for video production for years, through a curated set of directors, a TV spot, which they did for Mother's Day, and it cost them $10,000. Well, one of their actual ad agency is one of the WPP companies. They weren't too thrilled about that, I bet. So what are they going to do? Pretend it doesn't exist? No, they can't do that. So that, we are using the creation of original content at much lower cost means. We're using crowdsourcing ourselves. We have to just change the way we do business too. And
yeah, I was having a conversation with a TV agent about a month ago around the upfronts, and I asked how the upfront was going, and he said, you know what? There are now 46 buyers for original serialized television content. There has never been anywhere near that amount. So the question then becomes not just making the content, it's how to get it noticed, how to get it out there, how to get paid on it. And I think the question then becomes, in this saturated media environment, what are the real curators? What are the ways that as a professional content creator, or even as a brand looking to get eyeballs on a potential viral video or something like that, what are the real curators?
Sure. I mean, I think they're evolving, right? There are a number of curators, and I think as you look at the different options of where people can get content and start to build communities around the content is where you see the evidence of that curation. So we talk a lot about social media. The capability of social media to build a community and to deeply engage with content and to help in that curation process. But I think curators are absolutely developing. I mean, we will continue to have the traditional models and the players that have been in place, and all of our research is showing us that. But we are seeing additional curators develop in the market, and social is playing a big part of that.
So I think there's probably a couple levels of curation. On one level, I'm the most important curator of my content because I personally have the ability, because of mobility and technology, to do that. But I have a limited amount of time. So we were talking about what people value. They value utility, they value entertainment, they value information. Those are the three things that any curator can deliver. And so there are some categories. So there are news curators, there are news aggregators. You can go onto newser.com and get a really fast view of what's going on in the world. And you might not want to at the same time, or you might want to do that, and then later when you have more time, you're going to go to the newyorktimes.com. It's, again, not an either or, but I think that kind of vertical curation can be done. And then I think there are communities, which are so social movements and all of the shifts that are happening where self-identified communities are coming together. They can perform a curation function too, because most of them have a digital presence. Most of them can deliver opinions about content. So I think there's multiple levels of curation that we'll see.
One interesting thing that jumped out at me from the report is that as much attention as over-the-top services are getting, the prediction is by 2017 it'll just be 6% of the market, and pay TV is still going to dominate. It gets to that question that Marcel was talking about protecting the legacy business. I mean, is that, when the lion's share of revenue is still going to be driven by this legacy business, how much is the investment justified in this area?
Well, it comes down to who's going to pay for the innovation. I mean, we see margins being, really pressured on the content and the media companies. We see it in service agencies like us. There's a limited amount of investment if you can't see what the payoff is going to be. And I think we're going to battle that over the next few years. But at the same time, I think the report says very well, if you're not doing continuous innovation, you could just put yourself out of business. So you have to you just have to do it. So,
yeah, sure. I think the reason why you see the traditional model still having so much of the revenue as you get out is because they have compelling content. Yeah. And they have compelling content in one place. And particularly when you think about live events, sports, which I think Marcel mentioned before, very compelling, and people are going to go back to that. And the studies will show you too, as you look at the different demographics in the population, younger people have more time and less money, so they can go search for it. As you get older, they have less time and more money. So that bundled solution and that one place to go for your content's very attractive. And so as you look at that trend and why, there are very good reasons why it will be what it is, because all that content exists in one place and it's easy to get to. So until there's a point that you can see the ROI on that innovation. We see some interesting tests, right, in the marketplace.
Netflix is a perfect
Absolutely.
test.
You see,
I mean, they're spending millions on original content. They've got a lot of attention. Their subscribers are way up. But a lot of people think they're overspending, that this cannot be sustainable. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I don't know if the same level that they're doing right now is sustainable, but I think the thing we have to remember, and Marcel talked about the mature markets, a tiny shift in a mature market is a big deal. So there's $165 billion of media spend projected for 2013. What are the alternatives for a marketer if they don't go through what we call the traditional channels largely? I once knew a self-made billionaire who said, you'd be surprised how hard it is to spend $1 billion. That's his personal money. So just,
can you give my number?
We'd like to try that. I think we could help him with that. There you go.
But when you look at the major marketers globally, they're still having to put through most of their spend into, again, what we call traditional channels. What I think is going to happen is traditional is going to get redesigned. So what mobility does is let us, start to take typical traditional kinds of formats and make them much more interactive, make them much more relevant. So that's why in Ogilvy, we have mobile technologists sitting in the creative department working with the creative directors. And if you don't bring marketing and engineering together, you can't really change the way that creativity is delivered. But that's really what our goal is. And I think that the change of the last 20 years has been fairly slow considering what has been possible. But what will happen as we go around the world, I mean, we see in China already that it's a little bit like the US 20 years ago. So yes, there's a huge amount of mobile and digital and e-commerce. We do all of that kind of work. We also make a lot of TV commercials, and they work. So, I don't know if that's the same thing that you see, Marcel. But
I was going to say 48% of all advertising in China by 2017 will be online. 47%.
That's fascinating.
But is on.
There's a huge amount of TV advertising.
Yeah. But is online? What is it? Is it video? And is digital video the same as TV advertising? It's getting closer and closer. So, I don't even know if the definitions and the distinctions make sense anymore.
Well, just going off of what he said earlier about this notion of content plus, what does that mean to you?
Well, it's things like, he was talking about the second screen and companion content. Already, there are many major TV shows that are creating special content for the mobile device or the second device or the third device. And that has something that is either more interactive, something you can't do on typical television, or it has something that they're just not going to deliver on television, so it's different. And people are willing to go deep, into content. They don't just want to consume what everybody gets to see on the screen. And this is not new. The movies have been doing this for a long time, putting special content on DVDs or outtakes, whatever. So I think there's a lot of creativity that can be applied there, but that's the kind of thing that we'll see.
I think that's where the expanded business opportunity lies as well, right? Because when you think about, it's not just repurposing that primary screen content. That's where sort of the initial experiments weren't as compelling as they could have been. But it really is a companion or differentiated experience that offers that level of engagement. And then you see a lot of development, particularly in the last 2 years, around all the apps that go with that, which assist you in the content discovery and really help you find the way to engage with that, and then offer, as I think we heard a little bit before, different ways to reward you for that, whether it's content, whether it's a Vigil with loyalty programs attached to it. There are different ways to push that engagement and really come back to your comment around curation and communities and building that connected consumer.
I think the other question that was brought up was about mobile advertising, how we're going to actually, get the advantage going for it. And I don't even think about mobile advertising. I think about mobile experiences. And we think creatively about creating apps, creating services that are delivered from marketers to their very mobile customers. So for British Airways, we're creating all kinds of special applications that their customer base is resolutely mobile already. They have to have something there that is a totally different experience and engagement exercise than making a high-level, single-minded message that might run on television. Not saying they won't still do that, but to really get consumer engagement, you just have to think, again, completely differently about it. And so I would think about services and apps rather than ads, because I don't think the small screen we're ever going to see, tremendously terrific, ads.
But the consumer is also pretty savvy about when they're being marketed to, and the key is that sweet spot where you invite the message onto your phone.
Yeah, and the consumer doesn't hate marketing, by the way. If they did, nobody would have been watching TV commercials all these years, and they like them. So, I think it's all about what do you have permission to do? Don't insult the consumer. Don't, overdo it. And be relevant and be valuable. And as far as I can see, again, there's device proliferation. There's multiple ways to consume more. So, the consumer's not saying I want less, but they are saying I want it to be good.
And
I think that's going to be the rub. Is we already have a lot of not great advertising online. We have a lot of not great advertising probably in every channel, but this is a demanding consumer, and they can easily turn you off. So,
well, in the U.S. market, DVR penetration is at now about 50%. What happens when that gets to 60, 70, 80%?
I mean, it's everything that we've just been talking about. Just
It is.
The tail, the curve just goes up. But even with DVRs, there's still a way to engage with a consumer. There's still a way to get data working for you. I mean, that question about are advertisers going to and marketers willing to pay a premium for data? Well, yes, that's what the direct marketing business has been about for 50 years. If you can deliver a higher quality, more targeted customer, you should be able to charge a higher cost per thousand. And that's been done in list media for a long time. You just have to apply that sort of thinking across broader base.
And the trend with DVRs, I mean, that's just one more step, right, in the journey of mass media to my media, right? When I want to watch the content when I want to watch it. And if you look at the trends around VOD and how much consumers are willing to engage in content in that way, I mean, you talked about Netflix. That's a good example. It's blurring the lines between a television program and a movie. You can watch all the episodes at once, 13 hours of it at one time if you want. And so it's a journey, right, that we're allowing consumers to get the content when they want it and how they want it, and it's making it more valuable, and therefore the advertising that gets attached to it has more value.
What's an emerging market, just to shift gears a little bit, an emerging market that you think is sort of under appreciated right now?
Geographically?
Geographically.
Well, I mean, we sort of, for 15 years, have been looking at, because we're global, the BRICS, and then what we call, or what Goldman Sachs calls the Next 11, and then there's a couple new ones that you mentioned today, Kenya, who aren't officially in the Next 11, but these are all, we see really exciting things happening in these markets, and that's where all of our growth as an agency group is going to come from. So, we're not giving up in the U.S. because nice scale, but all those markets will drive, real creativity and with those new emerging middle classes, the ability to do different things. I mean, we just did in India, for instance, a Lifebuoy soap thing where we realized that we were trying to actually connect it to a social good, so getting people to wash hands more, reduce disease. So we went into this huge religious festival, and they stamped the Lifebuoy soap on the roti bread that everybody at that festival, hundreds of thousands of people, were going to be eating all day long. And it was, that's unusual media, but it was and it
Red
was
media.
It was paid media. It cost something to do it, but it was immensely successful. So, I mean, I think everybody knows the list of countries where interesting stuff is going to happen, but it's just we're going to go country by country. I mean, the great thing about it, a place like Asia or Africa, Asia, there's 50 countries, there's 16 major languages, but a whole group of other ones. How do you, if you think about the data world, how are you going to harness data in that environment? That's going to take real technology and automation and permission from the consumer. But it's a great opportunity. I mean, there's a million things you could do. And I think Africa is similar too. We see a lot of things with the payment system capability where people who never had the tether, as Marcel called it, we call them cord nevers. They're not cord cutters. They just never are going to have one. They're going to use that portable mobile device to run their lives. And again, we see that as opportunity and for creativity.
I think if I were to pick a country, an individual country, I'd pick probably Nigeria. The one that's shown up new in our research this year, and we've been hearing Bollywood for years. Now it's Nollywood. So I think we need to focus on, given the ad dollars flowing in there and the mobile story. But I'd probably answer that question a little bit differently as well. And I'd say, perhaps the story isn't as much about the 2 billion people that have internet access today, but the next 5 billion, they're going to get it. And that 2/3 of the population being middle class in the next 20 years. And how are we adapting as an industry to solve to that and to provide that unique customer targeted experience and really understand those customers at a granular level, not about the big data, about the small data and the overlaps of what they really want.
And will it take a professionally created mobile show or something that is uniquely mobile? We talked a little bit about the need for specific content created for mobile. Do you think there will be some kind of game changer, like an Avatar was for 3D or something like that, where it's a purely mobile show that is made for that device and is specifically going to, bring in new consumers or open up that market?
Well, I think we've already had that a couple of times. I mean, there's been mobile sports content for a long time, which is really powerful. There's been a couple of episodic series already created, at least for just online. And when you say just online now, it means every mobile device. So, and there isn't, just the super small screen, it's the tablet growth is probably just as important as the smartphone, because you can actually have a higher quality consumption experience on that. But I mean, when you look at behavior again, so a Hollywood actor can come up with Vine to self-promote, does the 6-second thing, and now everybody is flipping back and forth their 6-second video. So I feel like and Snapchat and things like that, those show that there's an acceptance level, and again, as the population ages and the new classes around the world who kind of have that device from the time they become consumers, that opens up the chance to do content in any format that we could think of. We're just going to have to do a lot of tests, see which ones stick and which ones don't.
And I think the story too in mobile to really make it successful is around the content discovery process. How do you optimize a content discovery process in a mobile environment? Because you want a piece of content, you want to be able to find it. If you're challenged with that and challenged in finding it in a legitimate area and a legal consumption, then we have piracy, right? So I think it's really around the content discovery and making that easy for the consumer, and that will drive mobile to the next level.
So how do we do that?
Well, I want to add one other thing about mobile too as well, if that's okay. I mean, I think mobile's really interesting from a business model perspective because it's a great test bed for content. So we're seeing some very interesting, innovative things there where you can put content in a shorter form on a mobile device and really test it. If it does well, it goes viral, it gets a lot of users, then as a content creator that is a worthy bet for you. It's a far change from the model of waiting for all the pilots to, all the scripts and original ideas to come in. This is a very interesting way to test content and shortcut potentially that process, and it's very economically beneficial to a content creator to have a different outlet to test content.
I think the other part of, and this goes back to both curation and to what you've just been talking about, there's a whole wave of sensor technology that's now going to be integrated into all the devices. We've been working with Qualcomm, who are our client, but we actually work with their lab division as a partner to develop mobile apps for our other clients. And their whole technology is based on the ability to automatically sense personal preferences, demographics, location. And this is at the earliest stages. Now, I mean, people know about geofencing and those things, but eventually your device is going to be, could be wearable. I mean, we're already experimenting with wearable communications on behalf of a couple of big advertisers. So, you know, as that technology, we started 18 months ago on this partnership. We're just now going out to clients with very specific in the hotel business, in the, you know, in the credit card business, and all these, in the travel business. There's just a number of specific apps we'll go and try and test with them. But all you have to do is get 1 or 2 or 3 of these to catch on. And then
Google Glass?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's another example. But, you know, these are the kinds of innovations that you have to be working on now. It might take 5 years for them to, again, get some critical mass, but that's okay.
And I think we come back to the issues around that's very exciting, right? It allows you to get the clutter out of your life, really, and get what you're very interested in. But as we heard earlier, it's really around protecting customers' privacy in that process as well, because they are concerned about that. So finding that balance between giving them the optimum content that's targeted and it's what they're looking for, while having them, you know, opt into the process of providing all that information and letting you use it in the most creative ways.
You know, demographics and the sort of analytics of demographics are interesting to media now, because, you know, if you're trying to market to a mass audience, if you are in the film business and you're trying to launch a worldwide blockbuster, the demographic information a lot of people in Hollywood think is not being used as much as it should be. You look at the NBC Universal just released this Fast and Furious movie. 30% of the audience for that movie is Hispanic. And if you talk to people at Universal Pictures, they say this is an audience that is not being marketed to, there's not these kinds of big budget films with multicultural casts, and there's really a disconnect. And how much in the media business are we not using demographic information smartly?
Well, I think probably a lot, because the tools have been kind of rough. But I just met a company through Andreessen Horowitz. You know, we spent a day meeting the companies they've invested in, and one of them focuses entirely on this for the studios mostly so far. They have a couple other clients. And they, I think it's called Quantifine, but I have to double check that. Again, startup, very new company. And they actually have a case history where they worked with the studio on the development of the script, because they brought the predictive analytics to the way the movie was going to be written and executed. And they said, your assumptions are wrong. And I have the data to prove it. So they changed the actual movie. They changed the content of, and it's a fantastic story, and it
worked?
Yeah, and it worked. And so now they've got clients at every studio. So that's all. All they got to do is go take that case out, and they're going to do very nicely. But then they'll go to financial services marketers and lots of other people to show that same capability. And the ability there is taking quite unstructured intent data from search and social uses, as well as structured data, and putting them together. So that's the big challenge of I hate the term big data now because it's so overused, but the challenge is putting those two things together, because you can do all the listening you want online, you can create feeds from all your social sites, but if you can't make that turn into information instead of just raw unstructured data, then it's not very valuable. And that's what this particular company is focused on. So I think we'll see a lot more of those.
I think what's really exciting about the trends we're seeing in digital and the opportunities it offers us is the ability to really much more closely understand and connect with the consumer and understand what they are watching. And so there's a feedback loop, a direct feedback loop that can exist through digital that hasn't been there before. So if you're looking at a television show that's very popular and you're looking at ratings on that, it can be not just the people that rate it, it could be people that watched it the whole time but didn't rate it, or the person that went for 20 minutes and then never came back. You don't really need a 0 rating to know that.
Yeah, Netflix says that. Even if you don't rate something, if you watch 8 hours of something, you pretty much liked it.
Yeah.
If you turned it off after 15 minutes, you didn't like it.
So how do you, when you look at the predictive analytics and the power of that, how do you look at that for one show, look at it for a different show, compare the demographics, and sort of create the magic in the middle, which is what is the shared dynamic of those customers. Did they like the type of storytelling? Did they like a particular actor? And then create the content that comes back and reaches into that community in a much more targeted way that attaches the advertising dollars to go with it. So those are just very exciting opportunities that we now have because we can track that level of engagement.
All right, we're going to open it up to a question or two if people have questions for either panelists. One here.
Carla, James Orsini, Single Touch Mobile Solutions. In your industry now, do you believe that these mobile solutions need to move out of the creative department and into the strategy or planning department? I mean, you talked about thinking of mobile as a service and not as an ad, and you know, Marcel talked about, and Deborah as well, mobile moving from the mass media to my media. Yeah. I saw a case study with Hotwire.com, whose mobile app was just for booking hotels. It wasn't a replication of their website, and what they found was that the mobile user is not going to book an airplane or a car. Just when they're on the road, they want to get a quick and cheap hotel. So the app solution was just that simple, and they saw hotel bookings spike 23%. So it doesn't have to move out of the creative department into the planning and strategy department?
I mean, I can speak about the way we're structured, and we're fortunate to, for many years, have had not just an advertising agency approach. We've had digital and direct marketing capabilities. We've been in technology marketing for a long time. We have PR who really developed our social capability. And so what we've done is create something called Mobile at Ogilvy. It takes people from around the company who have to understand mobile from either creative, technology, media, analytic, all those points of view, and we put them into this offering, and that's how we actually go to market for to help clients. And there's one leader who, you know, he's not a creative leader. He's somebody who understands mobile, and he's our global head. We have regional leaders and local leaders too. And the importance of that is, as you know, if you aren't doing mobile all day long, every day, you can't stay on top of it. We learned this from the search business, actually. I used to know a huge amount about search when 1997. I don't know anything about it anymore. We've bought companies. We have people who know every single aspect of it, because you can't keep up with the change unless you do it all the time. So that's why we have these sort of battlegrounds that we're focused on. Mobile is one of them, social is another, and that's what's happening in digital, is that it's becoming so many different things. But we do, at some level, go back to the creative organization. I mean, our hope always is that we're going to be both the most creative and the most effective with our work. And so you know, we need engineers, we need technologists who understand mobility to be able to, and strategy, and insights about consumer behavior, to be able to round it all out. But ultimately, you do have to get some creative people in a room who can build something, who can make some stuff. And so I think that still goes back to, you know, we value those people very much, and we hire that kind of talent. They're all coming out of school now, having been, you know, grown up with mobile devices, and they understand them better. So as the population ages, so does our creative department. And you know, we hire many, many younger ones to help us there.
I would echo from the content side and from the distributor side as I look at our clients. You know, 2 years ago we had digital divisions. You don't have those anymore. You don't have mobile divisions anymore. They're very much part of the mainstream content creation or distribution process, just another place to put the content.
But professional, like Hollywood-style content is still very much behind. There are big silos in terms of film, television, digital. It's merging a little bit, but you don't see that as much in the, you know, Hollywood-oriented content space.
Yeah, I actually think there's still a lot of clients who are marketers who are organized in the traditional methods, and that's because that's the way we account for things. So wherever the, you know, follow the money, that's the way people are going to be organized. But every client we have is asking us for advice on how to reorganize. How should we get our marketing department set up now that digital is pervasive and mobile is pervasive? And so those are questions every company is, I think, going to be answering.
Yeah, I think, and you know, 15 years ago, if you had said that the #1 show on television for 18 to 49 would be on a network called American Movie Classics and
Right.
about zombies, nobody
Right.
would have believed that.
Right.
And
Or ducks.
you know, and with exactly Duck Dynasty. But and you know, in our interview with Ted Sarandos, he was saying, you know, the reason why we spent $100 million on House of Cards and hired David Fincher to direct it is because after David Fincher directs a show for the internet, no one is going to say, I don't want to direct a show for the internet. And I think that's what you're going to see, you know, from then on. But, other questions? One over here.
Hi, I'm Brie Rossetti from Arnold. Hi. We've talked a lot today about mobile, about digital, but one of the things that was interesting to me is earlier you were talking about exploiting sort of existing data models and how we're not doing that. You mentioned MSP specifically. We work a lot with them. One of the issues I have with that sort of aggregate data is that it's really robust when it comes to traditional models and those sort of algorithms, but how do we sort of get to a state where we can use that to determine the impact of mobile or digital or social within an overall holistic experience?
Well, I think you're sort of talking about how we're going to use PII or personal information on a sort of scale basis. And while I do think there are a lot of concerns about privacy and about security, I also observe that, you know, the younger you go in the population, the less they have those concerns for whatever stupid reason. Many of them, I guess, don't want to run for office, but you know, because kids that grew up, people that grew up with Facebook and all of these social technology, they think that that's like electricity. It's just there. So they're not really trying to hide their personal data all that much. So I do think as both the population ages and emerges in some markets, you're not going to have the same issue of privacy as you might have in a country like Germany or even in the US, where it's hugely a big deal. But we're just, we're going to have to do what you always do with data and marketing, is use proxies and figure out what's allowed. You know, the credit card business for years has not been allowed to really use a lot of personal identified information, but they can use personal information. I mean, you know, if we couldn't, we wouldn't have been targeting offers the way that we have for years. So I just think there's going to be creativity around that, and we'll get to some good answers.
I think there's a lot of room to, even if I think about things like traditional set-top box data and how to access that and provide much more insight on a demographic and geographic basis than we're ever doing today. So even if you take the PII out of it, there's still much more precision that exists in that data, and I don't think we're tapping into that today in the way that we could. There's growth there.
One more question. There's one. In the back.
Mark Newcomer from Digitaria. There's been a lot of talk today about mobile and not as much focus, I think, today on interaction within TV and some of the other channels that you might want to interact with. Could you maybe comment on where that comes into play, and especially in the next 5 years?
Can you,
You're talking about traditional TV or?
Well, we've got Xbox One coming out in the near future. You know, we had Google TV come out a couple years ago. We had Apple TV. We've got a really rich place where we have the second screen experience. We have a better first screen experience coming out, but we don't hear a lot of people talking about this is the place that might be the new area where we see apps being developed. So I'm curious, when do you see any play in the future or the near future for that to be the next kind of innovation spot?
I do think people are working on that a lot. You know, each of those that you mentioned, there's a lot of innovation in work, but because the numbers are so concentrated on what we call traditional, you know, you may not hear about it as much. So you know, I think it's very significant. You know, doing things with all of those devices and those technologies is something everybody, you know, should be focused on. But I just don't know if we're going to get to a big enough scale. You know, I don't know if that's 5 years or 7 years or 10 years.
I think it comes back to the content discovery question too. You know, what is the easiest way for a consumer to find what they want to watch? And there are a number of apps out there, but there are many more that are being developed, and I think that's really sort of the secret sauce is finding a way to connect customers with that content that they're searching for and want to get to easily.
But it really goes back to what we talked about earlier, which is what is the difference between IP delivered television experience and terrestrial television? I mean, for the consumer, there isn't going to be a difference. There already isn't. So,
Right.
you know, they don't, if they're watching Apple TV on their TV set, great, but they might be also able to consume it on 10 other platforms. So, you know, I just think that we have to put ourselves in the shoes of the consumer, and of course we're all consumers too, as well as business people, and realize that those distinctions and definitions have to be recast.
Yeah, I think it's true, and I think the one part that's missing is that's the one channel that offers true convergence of a lot of these technologies coming. And you know, even though various players have missed in the past, I think the future has to be there, because that's where the living room is still going to be a place where a lot of the really rich content is consumed.
Yeah.
I would echo that, because when you look at the mobile usage and the second screen content, it's predominantly in the home. You know, it's predominantly sitting in front of the television, on your tablet, you know, or working with that alternative device. So it is occurring in that place.
I think the other place this is going to come into play is with e-commerce integration, you know, through the TV experience, which there's been lots of work done in the UK on that, and there's some good, you know, models for it, but it hasn't been sort of globally scaled. And I think people wanting to point their finger or, you know, touch a screen or do whatever to be able to buy what they see when they see it, that's going to be a big motivator for retailers and for other people to do that innovation work.
Okay. Thanks very much. This was
Thank
great.
you.